Good, we'll make a start, I think. Good evening to all those in the room and those on Zoom. Um, Welcome to our first midweek spotlight of the year. For those of you who are newer with us at midweek, we, over the course of the year, once a term, just take a step back from whatever it is we happen to be studying, so Hebrews this year, and just try and think a little bit more detail about a particular issue or a particular subject or a particular topic. And yeah, we just do that once a term. So this year we're going to think about three areas of life, I guess, that are kind of applicable to pretty much all of us, and just think, okay, rather than just looking at one particular passage, just try and get an idea, what does the whole Bible have to say about this subject? And how can we help one another as Christians think through this area of life? So in quite a few months in the summer term, we're going to be thinking about God and our time, when there's so many things we could be doing, when life is so busy. How do we think about how we use our time well and wisely as Christians? Next term, so after Christmas and the New Year, God and our screens, we're going to think about the whole kind of issue of how do we consume media, the internet, mobile phones, social media, all that kind of stuff. What does the Bible have to say to us about what is just becoming a bigger and bigger part of modern life? So just to help us think through that a little bit. And tonight we are thinking about God and our work. So that is our subject this evening, God and our work. And just to clarify, when we talk about work, as well as thinking about a kind of paid job, so kind of 9 to 5 employment, really when we think about work, we're thinking about something broader than that. And we're thinking about those things that we do, and I guess the things in which we put time and effort to serve other people, to help other people. So work might be in our homes, it might be with our families, and some of us might be stay-at-home parents. Some of us might be looking after our own parents, depending on what stage of life we're at. We might be involved helping look after the neighbours and friends and things like that. So it includes all of those kind of things. It includes the stuff that we do that we don't get paid for, and maybe that nobody sees, the kind of voluntary work that we might do to serve in our community, involved with various organisations. I know there are people here involved in different clubs and local community groups. I think work would cover that kind of topic. In some ways, it also includes the things that we do that we might just consider kind of everyday stuff, like looking after the garden. But for some of us, actually, the time we spend doing that, the time we spend kind of labouring to keep the garden or to keep the house in good order, I hope we'll see this evening, is all part of what it is to work. So we certainly are thinking about work in a kind of 9 to 5, this is my job, clocking in, clocking out kind of way. And we'll touch on some specifics about that. But we are thinking more broadly. Because I think that it's true of all of us, whatever stage of life we're at, even if we are not yet old enough to be doing kind of paid employment, or if we were studying, or if we've retired, there will still be elements of our life that are work, effectively. Even if we're not being kind of paid for it anymore, we're not employed to do it. But I just want us to keep that in mind. And the two big things that we're going to see are two things that I think the Bible makes clear are absolutely true about work, and that are helpful in understanding our experience of it, even though they might seem at first glance to be a little bit contradictory. And that is that work is good. That's the first thing we're going to see. And then secondly, that work is grim. That's the second thing we're going to think about. Work is good and work is grim. So we're going to think about each of those in turn, and then think about, in one sense, how we hold those things in tension and how that tension can be resolved as we look at the Bible story. So that's where we're going. Let me pray, and then we will head on in together. Heavenly Father, we thank you that the Bible speaks to us about all of life. We thank you that it is not a dead book, but that it is living and active, that it speaks to real people with real lives and every aspect of our lives. And so please help us this evening as we think about this area, the whole issue of work, whatever that looks like for each of us involved this evening. Please help us to take away true and helpful and encouraging things that maybe will challenge us. But please let us leave here more hopeful and more committed to live and work for you than we were when we arrived. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So the first thing that we want to say tonight is that work is good. And to help us see that, I want us to look at a few verses from right near the very start of the Bible in Genesis chapter 1. If you're using one of the church Bibles here in the room, then you are on page 3. Slightly confusingly, page 3 doesn't have a number, and neither does page 1 and 2. So the only way to find page 3 is to find page 4 and work your way backwards. There we go. And if somebody's happy to read for us, Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through to verse 3 of chapter 2, that would be great. Thank you.
And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kind."
Oh, sorry, I'm from verse 26.
Oh, sorry, that was 24. Yeah,
Sorry?
26. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's isn't. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea, birds of the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea, birds in the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw that all he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, and that was the 6th day. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work creating that he had done.
Brilliant, thank you, Anne. A number of things that we can observe from this. The first of which is to say that God is a worker. And everything in Genesis 1, the sort of the parallel accounts of creation that we get in Genesis 1 and then in Genesis 2 is a picture of the perfect world as God created it, and work is all over it. These chapters show us that God himself is a worker. Maybe you noticed it in those last few verses that Anne read, verses 2 and 3, kind of conclusion to the kind of poetic creation account of Genesis 1. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. God is a worker. He spends these chapters creating stuff. He categorizes things. He plans his work in an ordered way. At various points, God sort of stands back, like a craftsman might, or an artist, or a gardener, or a cleaner who might survey what they have just done and examines the quality of his handiwork, takes satisfaction from it, says it is good, it is very good. In that sense, this is a God who loves to work. So the first thing we can say is that God is a worker. And then secondly, kind of tied to that, we can say that we are workers, that you are a worker because you're made in God's image. When God designs human beings and makes them in his own image, he designs them to be workers too. So verse 27 of Genesis chapter 1, very famous verse. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. It's a huge idea, of course, being made in the image of God. And that idea is kind of used to mean a lot of things. But interestingly, when you look at what it means right here in the original context of Genesis chapter 1, a crucial aspect of what it means to be made in the image of God is to be a worker in the way that God is a worker. So verse 26, just before that verse, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and so on. Then we get verse 27. God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. Immediately afterwards, the other side of the sandwich, what do we get? Verse 28, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule, same idea, over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and so on. The context of the phrase, being made in the image of God, is about humans being given the job, being given the task, being given the work of ruling the world. It's as if God is basically saying, I'm going to make people to be a little bit like me. And the likeness is that just as it's my job to be ruler of everything, I'm going to design them to be little rulers as well. And I'm going to give them the job. I'm going to give them the work of ruling, filling, subduing this world that I've made. We begin to see then in chapter 2, in the kind of slightly more historical narrative account of the creation there, exactly what the job spec is in practice for Adam and Eve. So in verse 5, chapter 2, we're told no shrub had yet appeared on the earth and no plant had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not yet sent rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground. It's as if God has created the world pregnant with all this potential stuff that could be, but there need to be people there to work this potential, to bring it to fruition, to rule over it. One way that I found helpful to kind of think about this idea is the idea of working to bring order out of chaos. That's what God has done in the work of creation. At the beginning of Genesis, the earth is kind of formless and dark. The Spirit moves over the waters. It's a kind of chaotic, dark picture, and God brings light out of darkness. God brings order out of chaos by creating where things were formless, taking the raw materials, and then us taking the raw materials of the world which God has made and using the skills which God has given us and using them to produce, to maintain, to improve. So we, as people made in his image, work now to bring order and hold back chaos. This means that, shock horror, we are actually designed to work. Work is a good thing. It's good for us. It's good for the world. I guess work doesn't have that kind of reputation often. You know, work is just something you have to suffer so that you can do all the things you really want to do. But actually, when we read the Bible's account, we see it's not like that. And actually, deep down, I think we know that, don't we really? We're not designed to sit on a beach or play golf 365 days a year. Early retirement might sound like a wonderful idea, but eventually, if you've nothing useful, nothing productive to do, then it becomes boring. I'm not just speculating about that. Actually, I know a number of people who retired early and then went back to work. That's what my own father did. And he was a teacher. He was in that sort of fortunate generation of teachers that was able to collect his teacher's pension and retire early at whatever it was, 59, 60, something like that, which he did. And then about 6 months later, went back in a slightly different capacity. He didn't have to do as much stuff in the classroom. He basically didn't have to see as many kids. But he was, back in school, working slightly shorter hours. It was, a better fit for the stage of life he was at. But after 6 months, he was restless. He wanted something to do every day. I suspect my mum was probably a bit restless as well. She would quite like for him to have something to do, get him out of the house. But I think we know that. And we know that partly as well because we know that not having productive work to do does terrible things to people's sense of kind of worth and value. Some of us might know how painful that is at the moment for ourselves or for people we know who would love to be in work, who would love to have something to do, but are struggling to either find work or struggling for other reasons, for health reasons, to be able to do. It is all part of God's good design. We are made in the image of God, who is a worker, to be workers. And that means, thirdly, that work is good in that all godly work is purposeful work. So in the Bible, there's no pecking order when it comes to work. Being a musician isn't more important than being a manager. Being an underwriter in an insurance firm isn't more worthwhile than being an undertaker. Being a pastor isn't more important than being someone who makes pasta. But as we've seen, whatever we do, insofar as it's a moral job to do, we contribute to the task of ordering and sustaining our world. And as we do that, we bear the image of God, the worker after whom we're modelled. And that's true whether the work we do is kind of well paid or not paid at all. It's true whether the work we do is seen by millions or seen by nobody. It's true whether, in one sense, our society really values the work we do, or whether it's something that people don't really notice. Because God notices, God sees, God values, and everything that we do, everything that we contribute to serving our society, to ordering our world. It means really, I think, that whatever we do, it matters that we do it in a manner which reflects God and his image well. In that sense, the way in which we work is almost more significant biblically than exactly what our work is. Insofar as we're able to work every day to the best of our ability, with honesty, with integrity, with fairness, seeking the good of others, working with a servant heart, in short, insofar as we reflect God and we mirror the character of Christ to those around us, well, in that sense, all work has magnificent purpose because we're doing that which we were created to do. We're contributing, in that sense, to the ordering, to the flourishing of the world in whatever little way we're able. Of course, if we don't work in a godly manner, then that purpose is somewhat negated. If I lie all the time in the course of my work, if I work purely selfishly just to serve my own ego or my own greed, then I'm not going to do a very good job of reflecting the image of the God who is, by very definition, true and selfless and loving. But it is very easy for us, I think, to be sucked into thinking that it's what we do gives our work purpose. And that's very easy, I think, as well, because of where we are. And partly, I think, being in a city like London, which is always slightly kind of competitive, always slightly where am I on the ladder? That doesn't necessarily help. I also think that some of us will come from cultural backgrounds, and I think there are a lot of people around us from cultural backgrounds that are very hierarchical in terms of esteeming certain jobs over and above others, for all kinds of reasons. But in some ways, I think in British culture, and that is often the case, but it's often not really sort of talked about very much. People just sort of silently have those kind of values. But actually, for some of our friends and neighbours, it's not very subtly thought about at all. It's quite explicitly talked about. You may, as I say, some of you may know from your personal experience, from your family backgrounds, the pressure to attain to a certain level, the pressure to get a certain job because that's what's expected of you, and anything else would be a disappointment. But that is not the Bible's story. God, it seems, is much less interested in exactly what we do and much more interested in how we do it. So as you stroll to the office tomorrow, or out into the garden, or into your client's house or your neighbour's house, or as you wander over to the cot to pick up the screaming baby again, you can remember that today I'm to work for my Heavenly Father and like my Heavenly Father, fulfilling my little bit in the task of keeping the world in good order and displaying the image of God to the world as I do so. Now that's the kind of big picture. There's a number of other reasons I think that we're given in Scripture for why work has real purpose. And I've listed them there on the handout. There are 5 of them. We're not going to look at the references. We're not going to go through them in detail. And it's worth saying a number of these do apply more specifically to kind of paid work. And we'll see why as we go through. But very quickly, there are a number of other things. If we had more time, we would be able to think about in more detail. But firstly, in 2 Thessalonians, as Paul writes to the church there, he talks about the value of work so that people are not a burden to others. It seemed like in the Thessalonian church, there were people who had become Christians and had basically then realized that if they didn't work, that their Christian brothers and sisters would kind of help them out and kind of keep them fed and so on and so forth. And Paul says that's not good. You shouldn't just be relying, in one sense, on the generosity of others. If you're capable of providing for yourself, you should work so that you're not an unnecessary burden on others. You shouldn't be lazy like that. And then coupled with that, our second point, he says, and work also has value because if you're not working, you'll find something else to do. And if you're not doing something productive, then probably what you'll do is something annoying and intrusive, because you'll stop being busy with work and you'll become a busybody, poking your nose into other people's lives, other people's business, where you don't need to be. So Paul says work has value because it gives you something to do, keep you busy. Third reason why work has real purpose is so that we can provide for those around us. We can provide for our families. That's something that, again, Paul says in 1 Timothy is important, where people are able to be able to provide for themselves and their families. But even more than that, in Ephesians, our 4th point, Paul says that it's great if you're able to work in such a way that you have more than enough for yourself and your family, because then you can share with others. You can help provide for others in need. And then fifthly, again, writing to the Thessalonians, Paul talks about the way that work has value so that you win the respect of those around you, so that you win the respect of outsiders who don't look on and go, oh, those Christians, so heavenly minded, they're of no earthly use. So that people can see the way that that God's people contribute to the good of their communities, to the good of their societies, can see the way that they reflect God's image in the world, and can see the way that living as a Christian, in one sense, contributes to order and not to chaos, so that we win the respect of outsiders. Now, one observation about all those things, all those kind of bullet points put together, is that initially each of them makes work a very other person-centered centered activity. Lots of stuff that we hear about our careers, lots of stuff that you get in the kind of career guidance. One of our children had a careers session in school. I mean, absolutely far too young, absolutely pointless. It's got absolutely no idea. But nevertheless, but it's all about, well, what do you want to do? What's going to make you happy and fulfilled? Which is fine. Like, I think that's, that's a reasonable question to ask. But so often that is, in one sense, the message that people take into all of life. That my work, my career is all about me. That's what I do it for, to fulfill my potential, to satisfy my desire for success or reputation, to earn enough to buy all the stuff that I want. It's all about me. But notice how every one of these things is about serving other people through our work, maybe directly through our work. And some of us will work in jobs, or will be involved volunteering and doing work where we're constantly interacting with other people. We're serving other people directly. But in some of these cases, not doing that, but your work allowing you to serve people in other ways. And that kind of other person centeredness, as we reflect God's image, gives work real purpose. And I'm going to pause at this point just to take any questions on this whole kind of idea of work is good. And then we will quite literally look at the flip side. But any questions at this point from the room or from the Zoom?
Chris, I have a question.
Yeah.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
So when you just said, you made this point that should be other-centered work. It's not about, as we get career, whatever, counseling, it's what you like to do. And obviously it's God's work and serving others. But having said that, I mean, I think if you're really serving others, you serve others in whichever capacity of work, but it has to be something you enjoy doing. You can't be doing a job that you don't like doing just because,
Yes, I think, yeah. Thank you, Sanja. I think that's true. So I'm certainly not saying that your work shouldn't be something you enjoy. And I think that's what I mean in terms of, asking people what they want to do in their career. I think asking the question, well, what do you want to do, is probably a great place to start. We don't have to be miserable in our work for it to be good, godly work. And I guess the broader point I'm making though is that both in terms of the work that you do and what's produced by the work that you do, the primary question that the Bible asks of that isn't, I don't think, the same as the world's question, because the world's question is, what do I get out of it? I think, whether that's what do I get out of it in terms of my satisfaction, or what do I get out of it in terms of my money or the stuff or the experiences that it affords. And whilst those are not in and of themselves bad things, they're just not what the Bible's main concern is. And so, I mean, in one sense, we are fortunate as a society, and we're fortunate to live at a point in history where actually lots of us can choose what kind of work we want to do, and therefore can choose to do something that we enjoy or that we're interested in or we're particularly good at. I think we've got to recognise that globally and historically that's quite unusual. A lot of people in lots of parts of the world today, a lot of people down through history have not been able to choose. They've just had to do whatever they were told to do, or whatever jobs there were available for them to do. And in that context, I think it's important to not be thinking, well, this work is useless because I don't enjoy it. It's not what I'd like to be doing. Actually, the Bible is really affirming of saying, well, no, actually, insofar as that work contributes to the ordering of the world and contributes to the service of others, then it's a good thing. But by all means, if you do have the freedom to choose, then you don't have to choose the path of most resistance. You can choose to do the job that, wonderfully for you, what a blessing, is both satisfying and enjoyable, and also contributes in those ways as well. Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. We will have another opportunity for questions at the end. So if there are other things that come up. Let's turn the page then and think about the idea that work is grim. Because from what we've been saying so far, you might think, well, I mean, this all sounds wonderful. I mean, work should be great. You know, it's got purpose. It's an opportunity to serve others. It's an opportunity to glorify God. But then why so often, why in fact on most days, in some sense, does work feel like such a drag? Why does it feel like such a grind? In what sense is work grim? Well, the first thing we have to say is that is the case because work is broken. If any of you have been to work today or have done some work today, you know, out of the house or at home, this won't come as any kind of shock to you. Work is not a non-stop pleasure ride through serene waters. It is a bumpy journey over rocky terrain. And we are not living in the kind of nice ordered animals lining up to be named world of Genesis 2. We are desperately trying to keep a grip on chaos because work is broken. And we see how and why in Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3, of course, the account of the fall. Adam and Eve have been given every blessing, every good thing, and one very simple instruction. Just one thing that they're not to do. And that is the thing that they are tempted. That is the thing that they choose. And as a result, the world is cursed. The world is broken. And in Genesis chapter 3, in fact, can someone read me Genesis chapter 3, verses 17 to 19.
To Adam, he said, because you listen, that's right. Because you listen to your wife and are fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you. You will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return.
Thank you very much indeed, Steve. And it's interesting to see here, isn't it? This is the curse kind of pronounced on Adam after the fall, and a lot of it concerns work. It concerns what life is going to be like now, of doing the work, doing the job which God has given people to do. And it is going to be difficult. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it. Thorns and thistles, verse 18. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food. And it is going to be difficult. It's going to be hard to work. And then just flick forward a few pages to Genesis chapter 9, on page 10 in the church Bibles. And is somebody happy to read just the first two verses of Genesis chapter 9? This is after the flood. So God has kind of hit the reset button on the creation because people have become so evil. And he's starting again with Noah. And this is God speaking to Noah at the beginning of Genesis chapter 9. And you might notice some echoes of what he'd said to Adam back in Genesis 1. Somebody happy to read verses 1 and 2, Genesis 9.
Then
Stop being so polite, you just.
One of you. Sorry, for people who think we've got Christians in a doorway here, fighting over who's going to read. Go for it, Ash.
Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth, and on all the birds in the sky, on every creature that moves along the ground, and on all the fish in the sea. They are given into your hands.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ash. It's interesting, isn't it? They'll be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. It's a kind of repeat. It's the same task, but then we see verse 3, the fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the air. There's no sense really of the cooperation between people and the planet anymore. It's a picture of how the world has been spoiled by sin. It's an indication that from now on, just as it had been told to Adam, having dominion over the earth, doing the job of ruling, of working in the world, will not be a simple pleasure. It will be a battle. So work is hard because it feels so often like things don't want to work. We have to fight to get anything done. We have to fight to get the computer to work. We have to kind of work away just to get the plant to grow, to get the buggy to collapse, to learn the lines, to battle the traffic, to get the document to print double-sided. The list of frustrations and difficulties with work could go on and on. And I'm sure I don't need to persuade you, work is broken. But even more fundamental than that, this is the second heading, work is temporary. I don't know if maybe you noticed the climax of God's curse on work to Adam in Genesis 3:19, the ultimate futility for Adam and for all his children, including us, will be that ultimately his work will be swallowed up by death. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. And that idea, this whole kind of issue, is perfectly captured really by the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes. You want to turn to Ecclesiastes. It's on page 671, using the church Bibles. The teacher of Ecclesiastes, almost certainly the King Solomon, in all his wisdom. Ecclesiastes is a book all about the teacher's kind of search for meaning and purpose and pleasure and goodness in this world, and his frustration, the kind of hopelessness of that search if you take God and if you take eternity out of the equation. And in these verses, so from verse 17 of chapter 2, these are his reflections on work and on finding kind of pleasure and purpose in work. Is somebody happy to read? In fact, a couple of people happy to read. Maybe if someone can read from verse 17 through to verse 23, and then somebody else read verses 24 to 26. Thank you, Michael. And then somebody to read 24 to 26. Thank you, James.
So I hated life because the warfare is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I'm told for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all their own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless.
A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind.
Thank you. So the teacher says, there's a sense in which if you know God, that there's something to be said about the goodness of work, but basically it's all enormously frustrating, and it's enormously frustrating because it's all temporary. And it's temporary in two ways, he says. Firstly, it's temporary because we are temporarily in our jobs. We're temporarily in the work that we do. But then after a while, somebody else comes along and replaces us. Or worse still, our entire job is just rendered redundant. The sort of thing he's talking about in verses 18 and 19, those are the verses that I suspect are just kind of highlighted and underlined in Barack Obama's Bible. I just think if you want an example of this, I always end up thinking about Barack Obama. Because Barack Obama, humanly speaking, has been one of the most successful people of the 21st century. It's an extraordinary life story to achieve what he has achieved and accomplish what he's done through his career, rising up through the political ranks, becoming historic president of the United States for 2 terms. Remarkable. A real trailblazer, a real icon. And then in 2016, Barack Obama's 2nd term finishes and Donald Trump comes to power. And within about 12 months, most of the change that Barack Obama had enacted, most of his achievements have been completely undone. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. It's true for him, who's that successful. You think, yeah, gosh, how much more so is that true for the rest of us in the work that we do? And I worked for a debt charity, a kind of money education charity, for a number of years. I finished there in 2010, so it was like 14 years ago. I suspect now if you went back to their offices down in the centre of town, I wondered there might be one person there who would know my name. One person there who would have any memory of the fact that I had ever existed. And having poured whatever it was, 5.5 years of my life, of my toil into that work, and a little over a decade, nobody knows, nobody cares. There's nothing to show for it. Work is grim because it feels so temporary. But the second way in which it's temporary, of course, is that we're temporary. And in that eventually we die. And so we can spend all our lives working away for something, whether that's what we're making in our work or whether that's the money, the stuff that we're able to get through our work, a legacy or whatever it happens to be. And then we die. And so we just don't get to enjoy the fruit of what we've done. It's exactly the point that Jesus makes in Luke chapter 12. We won't turn to it, but the story of the rich fool. The rich fool was an extraordinarily successful man. He was a brilliant, brilliant farmer. And his fields were amazingly productive. His methods were magnificent. He was clearly a very astute businessman, made an enormous success of his life. Barns, bigger barns. He was doing amazingly, and he knew it. I'm doing amazingly, he says. Eventually, he says, great, I'm going to try and enjoy all that I've worked for. Jesus in the parable says, and that very night, God will demand his life of him, and then who will get all that he has worked for? Like the teacher in Ecclesiastes, like Jesus teaches us, like in one sense we all know from sorry experience of living in this world, death in many ways makes work seem pointless. That is, if you like, at the heart of the preacher's complaint in Ecclesiastes. There's also, I suppose, a sense in which work is temporary because the things that we make don't last, the things that we do don't last. Sometimes they don't last out the afternoon if what we've made is a trifle and it's a very sunny day. Sometimes the project is cancelled, the technology that we've been working on for years becomes obsolete, the strategy changes, the memory fades, somebody else wins the project, the slugs eat the petunias. Things don't last. We were talking about this morning, actually, Steve, talking about the work of, it's a really good illustration, I think, of the work of clearing the leaves at this time of year. A brilliant example of the goodness of work, right? Real service, really useful. A real whole, like kind of maintaining of order and holding back of chaos to serve the people in the community. But you come back 24 hours, 48 hours later, and we're just back where we started. We're just doing the same job all over again. The work is temporary. Everything about it is like that. And it makes work grim. And even worse is our third point. It's the fact that we cannot fix it. If we saw earlier that one of the main ways in which we reflect God's image in our working is that we are to bring order out of chaos, then the fundamental problem is that it is human sinfulness which has introduced and perpetuates that chaos. So we cannot fix the problem because we cannot fix ourselves. The Bible tells us that what we need is a total recreation, both of people and their hearts and of this broken creation. But as we finish, the wonderful, optimistic, hopeful news of the Christian gospel, the goal of the Bible's story, is of course that God can and God will fix it. Without that, really, without the narrative of the Bible, and if this world just came from nothing and is going to nothing, then work really is pretty grim, because it really is ultimately pointless. Nothing lasts. It doesn't matter how you do your job. There's no hope of work getting any better. It is, as the teacher in Ecclesiastes puts it, a chasing after the wind. You'll never get there. But as we've seen, working as Christians, all the work that we do, whatever it is, all of it has real purpose. As we work in the image of our God, work has real purpose. As we work in such a way as it brings him pleasure and honor and glory. As we serve others through our work. We studied 1 Corinthians a couple of years ago, where Paul speaks about love being the thing that lasts. As we love our neighbours, and as we love one another through our work, so we're able to contribute to something lasting. And ultimately, all of that finds fulfillment in the fact that God will fix work when he fixes our world. To see that, just turn with me to Isaiah chapter 65. It's on page 753 in the church Bibles. The book of Isaiah works right through, really, from the problem of sin and how God is going to need to deal with it in judgment, to the way that God is going to deal with the problem of sin by sending the suffering servant as a substitute to die for people, to die so that people's sins can be forgiven. And then Isaiah culminates in these wonderful visions of the future, of what God is going to do. And let me read from Isaiah 65 and from verse 17. See, I will create new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered, nor will they come to mind, but be glad and rejoice forever in what I will create. For I will create Jerusalem to be a delight and its people a joy. I will rejoice over Jerusalem and take delight in my people. The sound of weeping and crying will be heard in it no more. Never again will there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not live out his years. One who dies at 100 will be thought a mere child. One who fails to reach 100 will be considered accursed. They will build houses and dwell in them. They will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. No longer will they build houses and others live in them, or plant and others eat. For as the days of a tree, so will be the days of my people. My chosen ones will long enjoy the work of their hands. They will not labor in vain, nor will they bear children doomed to misfortune. They will be a people blessed by the Lord, they and their descendants with them. Before they call, I will answer. While they are still speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb will feed together. The lion will eat straw like the ox, and dust will be the serpent's food. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, says the Lord. You see how this answers the objection of the teacher in Ecclesiastes. No longer will they build houses and others live in them, or plant trees and others eat. People will enjoy, in one sense, the satisfaction, the fruit of their labour. My chosen ones will long enjoy the work of their hands. No longer will there be that frustration, that kind of vanity, that chasing after the wind that so much of our work now feels like. Work was there before the fall, and work will be there in the new creation. Work is good, that is still true, though at the moment work is also grim. But a day is coming when it will be all good once again. Any questions about any of that before we turn to pray together, I guess? But yeah, any questions on any of what we've looked at, any of what we've talked about this evening?
Just got a comment on you were saying if you went back to your job, nobody'd know you. I know if I went back to Aylwood School now, I think there's probably one person that would know me. But my last term when I was there, I had a student, really good student teacher. And so as I left, she was appointed a job, and she ended up in the classroom that she'd done her teaching practice in, which was really nice. And I packed it all up, including the Christmas tree, which I used to just put in a black bag, ready decorated. And she was so thrilled to find that. She messaged me, I'm so pleased, because she was Jewish, she'd never decorated a Christmas tree. It was amazing to find the tree, and all the decorations were on it. That's amazing. So something I did there did. But yeah, when I talk to those children from Aylwood now and ask them about the teachers, I don't think there's one name now that I know. So
yeah. And again, that's a good example, I think, of the tension that we feel between these things.
Yeah.
Because in saying that work is grim and work is temporary is not saying we leave no legacy. It's not saying we don't contribute to the good, the order and holding back of chaos of a classroom that has no decorated Christmas tree in it.
Yes.
There's a real sense in which work is still good, and we know that. I think we do get satisfaction from those kind of things, from a job well done, from contributing. But at the same time, there's that frustration. Sorry, go on, Steve.
That's more of that to pupils in the prior work.
Yes, it's true. Yeah.
Even though, like you say, you go back and start. But obviously, I suppose you're not likely to punch them because they're growing up in their school. But for them,
you'd be surprised how many I do.
Yeah, but for them, they will still remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, although it's interesting. So I come from a family of teachers, and it's interesting. My mum recently was trying to help one of our children with her maths homework, and was reflecting on the fact that she really struggled to help because even my mum retired, I don't know, 20 years ago, slightly less than 20 years ago, and even in that time, the way that maths is taught is totally different. So even in that, you go, well, yeah, but what I'm contributing now. Imagine being a computing teacher. Vital. I mean, in one sense, absolutely vital. But that my computing teacher taught us on a BBC Micro. Taught us how to program an MS-DOS. You know, you just think, yeah, great at the time, but so temporary, because so quickly what you've taught is obsolete. No one's using it anymore. You've always got that tension, I think. Yeah, it's good. It really is good. It really is worthwhile doing. And it's really worth doing to the very best of our ability. And yet, there's always that kind of frustration that comes with it, I think. Yeah, Mummy.
How can we as Christians, for example, in this church, maybe come to look at the work of the church as something that we can take part? You know, I don't know how to ask it, but how can we interest, or how can Christians attending this church or be interested in working for the church here?
Oh, yeah.
Getting involved in this? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, obviously, the work of it, the life of a church is only possible, only functions because of the effort, because of the work of its members. If it's just left to one or two people, there'd be so many things that just can't happen. It's just not possible. So the life of the church is a really good example of where lots of people are working, even though most people aren't being paid for that work. But that's a kind of a necessary part of it. And so I think asking where the needs are, what's the work that needs to be done, and thinking about what again, like Sandra was saying earlier, what are your skills, what are your interests, what are the things that you like to do? Because you want work, you want sort of service in a church to be a joy rather than a chore. And so it doesn't need to be, well, someone just needs to tell me what needs doing. There might be things that I enjoy or am interested in doing. And of course, I think what that looks like changes depending on, where we're at in life, depending on how much time we've got. Again, my mum is an interesting example of this. So I would now say, in one sense, most of her work is for her church because she's retired. And so she's around during the day, she's around during the week, so she can help at things that lots of people, like my sister, for example, who's at the same church, wouldn't be able to help at because she's working, she's doing paid kind of employment during the day. But my mum has been able to kind of free herself up so that 2-3 mornings a week she's there at the church and doing stuff. So I don't think it's a kind of, there's a sort of one size fits all for that. And wonderfully, God has designed his people to function with people in all their differences and all their different skills. Like we thought about the body in 1 Corinthians. And I guess the most simple thing I would say is if you're not sure, then ask somebody. Come and chat to me, or come and chat to James. Say, what could I do? What would be useful?
See a need, fill a need. To quote.
There's still a need the Need family an old member.
I was thinking it is the film Robots with Robin Williams. You've
totally lost me.
So that's the catchphrase, isn't it? See
a
need.
Okay.
I was just going to say, the fruits of your labour. I suppose everyone's different, obviously it's individual, no one fits all, but you get to a certain age and you think you're satisfied with benefits of work, where you live and that, and you want to enjoy the fruits of your labour. For some people, they might want to attain. For other people, more like me, I'm happy with what I've got, and I just want to spend more time to enjoy it. Not so much attain more, but just enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's down to its individual.
Yeah, no, thank you, Steve. That's a very good point.
It's all work, no play.
Yeah, yeah. So for people on Zoom, I don't know if they could hear that. That's Steve was saying about wanting to enjoy the fruits of your labour and to have the time to be able to enjoy the things when you've worked for a long time. And I think we've thought tonight about work. We will think, as I say, later in the year about time and how we use our time. What I'm certainly not saying is work should be kind of all we do. You know, you must almost be work. You should never have any hobbies or anything like that. I think that is equally non-biblical. I think right back to Genesis 1, God works and then rests. He doesn't need it. It's not like God's like, oh, I'm just totally spent after 6 days. But rest is a good thing. We studied the book of Exodus a couple of years ago, where Jethro comes to Moses and basically says, Moses, you're overworked. You're doing too much. You need to stop. You're not God. You need to sort of spread the load. So having things that are not work, having things that are see your Sam, see Mummy, are kind of spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally refreshing, hobbies, leisure, holidays, rest, is vital. We are made to be workers. Work is good, but that's not to say all we are is workers and therefore work is all we should do. That's not reflective of the image of the God in whose image we're made either. Brilliant. We're going to stop there. I presume the Zoom guys are going to pray together. So we will mute you guys.